chapter 21, text 21. I continuously offer my respectful obeisances unto your lotus feet, of which it is worthy to take shelter, because you shower all benedictions on the insignificant. To give all living entities detachment from fruitive activity by realizing you have expanded these material worlds by your own energy. Purport. Everyone, therefore, whether he desires material enjoyment, liberation, or the transcendental loving service of the Lord, should engage himself, offering obeisances unto the Supreme Lord, because the Lord can award everyone his desired benediction. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord affirms, Yeyatamam prapajante. Anyone who desires to be a successful enjoyer in this material world is awarded that benediction by the Lord. Anyone who wants to be liberated from the entanglement of this material world is given liberation by the Lord. And anyone who desires to constantly engage in his service in full Krishna consciousness is awarded that benediction by the Lord. For material enjoyment, he has prescribed so many ritualistic sacrificial performances in the Vedas, and thus people may take advantage of those instructions and enjoy material life in higher planets or in a noble aristocratic family. These processes are mentioned in the Vedas, and one can take advantage of them. It is similar with those who want to be liberated from this material world. Unless one is disgusted with the enjoyment of the material world, he cannot aspire for liberation. Liberation is for one who is disgusted with material enjoyment. Vedanta Sutra says, therefore, Ataso Brahma Jigyasa, those who have given up the attempt to be happy in this material world can inquire about the absolute truth. For those who want to know the absolute truth, the Vedanta Sutra is available, as is Srimad Bhagavatam, the actual explanation of Vedanta Sutra. Since Bhagavad Gita is also Vedanta Sutra, by understanding Srimad Bhagavatam, Vedanta Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, one can obtain real knowledge. When one obtains real knowledge, he becomes theoretically one with the Supreme, and when he actually begins the service of Brahman or Krishna consciousness, he is not only liberated but situated in his spiritual life. Similarly, for those who want to lord it over material nature, there are so many departments of material enjoyment. Material knowledge and material science are available, and the Lord provides for persons who want to enjoy them. The conclusion is that one should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead for any benediction. The word kama varsham is very significant, for it indicates that he satisfies the desires of anyone who approaches him. But one who sincerely loves Krishna and yet wants material enjoyment is in perplexity. Krishna, being very kind toward him, gives him an opportunity to engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, and so he gradually forgets the hallucination. Tam tvanu bhucho parata kriyatam samaya vatita loka tancham namani abhikshnam namaniya pada sarojam alpiyasi kama varsham. I continuously offer my respectful obeisances unto your lotus feet, of which it is worthy to take shelter, because you shower all benedictions on the insignificant. To give all living entities detachment from fruitive activity by realizing you have expanded these material worlds by your own energy. So, the purport of the purport is that according to your desires, you should worship the Supreme Lord. You may have different forms of desire. Akama, sarvakama va, moksha kama, udaradi, tivrena bhakti yogena, yajeta purusha param. It's stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam by Shukadeva Goswami. If one has akama, no desires, or sarvakama, he has all desires. He desires to enjoy everything in this material world. Or mokshakama, he wants liberation. A person who is intelligent will worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead for satisfaction of all desires. After all, it is Krishna alone who is the satisfier of all desires. Nicha nichanam chaitanas chaitananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kamam. It is very clear from this verse. There is one eternal amongst all eternals. There's one eternal living entity amongst all of the group of eternal living entities. That eternal living entity is the Supreme, who is superior, Krishna, to all of the living entities. And as evidence of this, or as an explanation of this, the verse goes on to say, Eka, that one, Bahunam, in relationship to the many, Vidadati Kaman, is supplying all of the necessities of life, desired things, Kaman. Kaman has many subtle meanings, but it means all our desires. So your necessities are also desires, because one has to have them. And similarly, that which you wish to have for more sense gratification, which is not a necessity, which becomes a necessity because of the pushing of the senses, that is also Kaman, that which we wish to have. So the Supreme Lord is both supplying all of the necessities of life and all of the desires to all of the living entities since time immemorial. Now he also says this, Saha yagya saha shishtam puravacha prajapatihi anena prashavishadvam eshavo svishtikamadu. He says in the Bhagavad Gita that in the beginning, this means when the materials were supplied to all of the living entities in their various bodies, I supplied the living entities with their various bodies and necessities along with the demigods who are meant to satisfy all of the needs of the living entities. And by performance of yajna, which I also supplied, if the living entities perform sacrificial performances, they will please the demigods, who in turn will supply all of the necessities of life to the living entities. Now, when Krishna said, I've given everything, he also included the concept of granting liberation as well. Because by worshipping in various performances according to the procedures which are given in the various Vedic literatures, one will also get liberation. So it is stated that the Supreme Personality of Godhead will supply all of the desired things to all of the living entities. And he's been doing it since time immemorial. In other words, you can't get anything unless Krishna wants you to have it. If Krishna wants you to have something, you'll get it, and no one can stop it. If Krishna doesn't want you to have something, you're not going to get it, and no one can give it to you. And we have a wonderful story in this connection. Chitriketu wanted a son, and he couldn't have a son. And he had 10,000 wives, and all of them were barren. So you can understand, this must be Krishna, right? If you marry one and she's useless, you marry another one, she's useless, you marry another one, she's useless, go on to 10,000. Of course, he's performing a service in the world by taking up under his shelter all of the barren women. But of course, that was giving him quite some horror in his mind, because according to the Vedic literature, one must produce a son for karma kanda purposes, fruitive activities. You've got to produce a son, because that son will, by performance of sacrifice, allow you to go to a heavenly planet, even though you're not qualified. It was a very, very psychologically scientific system. Now you, the father, may be rascal number one. But if you train your son up to be first-class man, then he's going to perform sacrifices according to the Vedic scriptures. And when he does the Shraddha sacrifice, offering Pinda to the forefathers, the Prashadam, to offer to Vishnu, then offer to the forefathers, then you're going to go to the Pitri Loka. And on the Pitri Loka, you're going to enjoy like anything. So, therefore, you had better train your son. But to train your son, you first have to have a son. So therefore, everybody was very much agitated to have a son. But to have a son, you have to do things in a better way. You can't be, for instance, so weak that you cannot produce a son. So therefore it encouraged them like that, to produce a son. And especially the first son, the first child should be a son. Then, after that, he will pull you out if you train him. Therefore, the Veda is very psychological. Is in an indirect way forcing the parents to be first class. Because if they're not first class, then the children are going to be third class, just like them. And the children being third class will never offer sacrifice to anybody. And therefore they're going to rot in hell and not go to Pitri Loka. And the hell is called Put. So therefore the son is called Putra, or one who takes you from Put. So, therefore, very scientific and intelligent social organization. In order to get enjoyment next life, you have to train up your son this life to be first class. So, when Maharaj Chitraketu didn't have a son, he was very disturbed. But Angira Muni was saying, when he came to visit him one day, that you're not getting a son because, well, it's just not your karma and Krishna doesn't want you to have a son. So forget about the son. So Maharaj Chitraketu couldn't forget about the son because all of the instructions of the Vedic injunctions were there in his mind and they were haunting him. So Angira Muni said, okay, you can have a son, but this son will give you great pleasure and also misery. Harsha Shoka he'll be called. He'll give you very great happiness, and he'll also give you suffering like anything. And don't blame me when it comes. So Chitraketu had to go through this. And even though he had a son, the son had to die when he was a small boy. And that was the end of the son. Lesson to be learned. If Krishna wants you to have something, you may accept it. If Krishna doesn't want you to have something, then all of the arrangements in all three worlds, including all benedictions you can get from all great sages and saintly persons, aren't going to help you. Because it is under the control of the Supreme. Everything's under the control of the Supreme. That's why he's called Ishvara. Ishvara Parama Krishna. Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hrideshe Arjuna Tishtati. All the wanderings of the living entities as they wander from this species of life to that species of life, or as they wander here on this planet, from this body to that body to that body. All of these things are under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's directing everything. If your desire is sanctioned by Him, He'll supply. And if your desire is not sanctioned by Him, He will not supply. So, having unlimited desires is worthless, unless those desires are in tune with the Supreme Personality of God. Therefore, it is recommended in that verse we quoted initially, that whatever, if you've got all desires, you've got no desire, or you desire liberation, you should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For that will give you perfection. You'll become the topmost personality, regardless of your desire or lack of it. So, there's no need for us to be filled with desire. That sounded good, didn't it? But we're always full of desires anyway, because after all, we're living entities. Living entities mean desire. All the time we're desiring so many things. This is the activity of the spirit soul, desire. The spirit soul is continuously desiring, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And because of his desire, decisions are being made, but not on the spiritual platform. On the spiritual platform, one decision is continuously being made. I'm going to serve Krishna, I'm going to serve Maya. Continuously. Before every action, before every moment, that decision is going on continuously. I'm going to serve Krishna, I'm going to serve Maya. At any second, you can change it. Therefore, one has to be trained to keep the desire strictly at the lotus feet of Krishna. Then, he's always desiring Krishna. But, when one surrenders his desire to Maya, then immediately it's taken away by the false ego. The false ego comes and scoops up your desire, and all actions of the material body start to take place. The intelligence, the mind, the gross body. Therefore, it is stated the spirit soul does nothing. Because it's all taking place by the modes of nature. However, the spirit soul is desiring. That's not nothing. His activities on the spiritual platform, on the material platform, he does nothing. But on that spiritual platform, he's desiring like anything. I want. And what he wants, that manifests on the material platform through the perverted reflection of the ego called false ego, which now causes him to desire everything in the material world for his own body. But in any case, whatever your desires, they can only be fulfilled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When? They can only be fulfilled when the Supreme Personality of God... Why isn't Govinda Madhava translating? What is this nonsense? We have a Ford down there translating when a Cadillac's sitting here. Get down there. The living entity can be satisfied only when the Supreme Personality of Godhead sanctions that. Now there are many ways why Krishna would sanction. Super soul within the heart sanctions our activities according to our karma. According to our karma, the super soul will say, yes, you may accomplish this thing which you wish to accomplish. Yes, you want to be president of the country? All right, work like this. Work like this. And when it's time for the election, yes, sanction is going on. Now you may win. But if no sanction is going on, you may spend billions of crowns with posters and radio announcements and TV interviews and campaign slogans and marches in the street. But you will lose anyway. It is a question of the sanction of the Supreme Lord. When the Supreme Lord sanctions, you will have all kinds of money. And when the Supreme Lord does not sanction, you will not have any money. When the Supreme Lord sanctions, you will be a great success and everybody will throw themselves at your feet, screaming your name and pulling out their hairs on their head in ecstasy. And when the Supreme Lord does not sanction, everybody will simply just spit in your face and kick you in the shins and laugh at you. This is the nature of this world. According to our karma, according to how we have acted in the past, different types of results must come. You cannot avoid them. Someday fame, someday infamy. That's all. There's no way you can avoid these things. Even for no reason whatsoever, one may do nothing. But one day somebody thinks he's wonderful, one day somebody thinks he's a fool. Because this is all simply under the direction of the material energy which is under the direction of the Supreme Personality of God. That's all. Now, there is a way to make a change in this. And that is through the desire of the living entity placed before the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the living entity places his desire at the lotus feet of the Lord, then the living entity's desire becomes the cause of the Lord offering him benediction, if the Lord so desires. If the living entity is offering Krishna very nice prayers, very nice service, very nice offerings of love, then the Lord will gives the living entity that benediction which will enable him to come to Krishna. Ye yatha mam prapojante tam sataiva bhajamyaham. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So if you surrender to Krishna with the desire of gaining material enjoyment, then Krishna can certainly award that. Even if it is your karma not to have, but if you act in a way which is pious, sacrificial performances, pleasing saintly persons, getting benedictions, you'll get that material enjoyment according to your desire. And if you are desiring liberation, then you'll get liberation according to your desire. And if you are desiring Krishna's service, you'll get that. Have you ever noticed that when you are desiring to serve Krishna nicely, and you want to do more and more for Krishna, then all kinds of service walks in the door and presents itself to you and says, kindly do this. Yet, even when that's going on, sometimes the false ego says, oh no, not more. That's the nature of Maya. But the point is that by our desire, we might satisfy Krishna. By our desires, we may act in such a way that Krishna may be pleased with us. If we offer sincere prayer, even it is stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that one who says to Krishna even once, my dear Lord, although in the past I have been rascal number one, from this day onwards, I am yours. You may do with me as you like. If one says that even once, Krishna accepts him as his own servant and helps that person to gradually come to the point of surrendering unto him in devotion. So Krishna will help. There's no doubt about it. But we have to want. When you want, then Krishna will help. But you better be very careful what you want. You better be very careful. If you want material desires, if you want material enjoyment, Krishna is going to give you that too. And then what will happen? Well, then you're going to have to enjoy. But what comes after enjoyment? Suffering. That's natural. Just like when you throw a ball in the air. It goes up. But after a while it comes back down again too. So you may go up to your material enjoyment. But when you return to your so-called normal state, you come down hard and suffering comes. It's the law of sense enjoyment gravitation. What goes happiness must go suffering. So long as you've got this happiness distress fixed within your circuitry and the law of karma, one has got to suffer. There's no doubt about it. Happiness distress, that's all there is to it. But if one knows that all of this happiness and distress are just the same coin of attachment, just the opposite side, then he avoids desiring for such things. He knows. But what is this platform? This is a platform called distaste. Distaste. Frustration. Or disgust. Depending on what word you want to use. All three words, they refer to the same thing. When one develops renunciation, bhoga and tyaga, while one is in the material world, he may experience some bhoga, enjoyment. And he may also experience some tyaga when he's finished with that enjoyment for some time. At that time, he may be able to have an opportunity. Now, in this material world, real renunciation begins with the platform of real disgust. When one understands This thing's a trick. I can give an example. It's not the greatest example, but it just popped in my head. Let's say you're going to buy a car, and you meet one of these cheating car salesmen who tell you all kinds of things, how nice you are and how wonderful you are. And then you think, okay, he's a good man. He says this car is good. So you buy the car. And after 2 weeks, you realize you're cheated. And this car is a complete horror. And they just put a little sawdust, mixed a little oil in the engine so that it runs real good. And, other kinds of tricks like that. And then after a week or 2 weeks, you find out the thing is a nonsense, number one, and it's making more smoke than a chimney. And then you go out and buy a car, get another car, and you get cheated another way by another cheater who was more expert than the last cheater. Then after a while, you start to develop some disgust for this business. Yeah. Or how about this? You eat, and you stuff yourself, and you get all kinds of heartburn and stomach upsetness and fatness and laziness all comes. So at that time, you think, oh, this is not so good. But you do it again anyway, because that's the nature of eating. And then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. And one day, you realize, what am I doing? This doesn't make any sense. I'm ruining my life. Just eating like this all the time. I'm not going to eat anymore. Because I'm disgusted with this whole process. Yeah. That even happens in all forms of sense gratification. Believe it or not, it does. And this is called the process of drowning the fire of lusty desires in deed. When one has so much material enjoyment throughout time, and it doesn't satisfy him, he realizes it is a waste of time, he surrenders. At that time, he gets disgusted. And he says, there must be something more than this. Krishna saved me. Or someone saved me. Depends on how advanced he is. Then Krishna will help that person. Disgust is a necessary ingredient to surrender to Krishna. If you haven't become disgusted with this material world, then you're not going to give it up. Unless one is very intelligent to understand that he'll never be disgusted with the material world, because of the material attachment. But if one is so intelligent, he can do. But unless he's so intelligent, he has to learn the hard way. School of hard knocks. Understand, this world is no place for a gentleman. It is not a place where I belong. An unintelligent person has to hear about it, has to realize it by suffering. So the suffering condition of life is granted. Krishna is very merciful. He'll give you the suffering. He'll make the arrangement so that you experience sufficient suffering to make you want to surrender. So one should be sincere. Pray to Krishna to help him actually surrender, to allow him to actually come to the point of giving up his attachment to the material world. So we should try to surrender by trying to put our desires at the right place. To try to place our desires at the lotus feet of the Lord. And request Krishna to help us. To help us desire the right thing. This is called desiring to desire. To ask Krishna, requesting Krishna, to please benedict us with the ability to desire the correct thing. To desire Krishna consciousness and not Maya. To desire spiritual life. To desire to be freed from the unwanted attachments of this material world, the anarthas. And when that desire is there, then nobody's going to have to tell us to chant our rounds. Nobody's going to have to tell us to hear. Nobody's going to have to tell us to serve Krishna. It's all going to come automatically. In fact, they're going to have to tell us to slow down. It's bad for your health. So I'm going to have to tell you. Now you have to surrender. You know! Why? Because of developing that intense attachment to the lotus feet of the Lord. So, kindly take these indications which are coming from the Srimad Bhagavatam to develop that intense attachment to Krishna and give up that attachment to Maya, which is the cause of all trouble in this world. Not this world, all worlds, all universes. Let's go back home, back to Godhead already. Enough, enough with all this material existence. Now we have to say, enough, I've had enough, I'm finished. No more. Then there's all possibility that things will go very nice. All right, buddy.